All right, the last piece we're going to work on with fractions is performing operations with fractions. And we're going to do this in two parts. We're going to look at adding and subtracting, and then multiplying and dividing. So make sure you put today's date in the upper right-hand corner or left-hand corner of your notes, whatever easiest for you, so we can keep track of the time of when you're taking these notes. All right, so adding and subtracting fractions. So to add or subtract fractions, you need a common denominator. So remember, we spent time before looking at how to find common denominators. And then when you're working on this, when you add or subtract all you're doing is adding or subtracting the numerator. The denominator remains the same. So let's look at an example. Let's say I asked you to add 1/5 and 3/5. So the first thing you check is, are the denominators the same? And they are, because they're both 5, so that's good. So now all I have to do is add the top, the numerators, and keep the denominators the same. So 1/5 plus 3/5 gives me 4/5. If we do a subtraction example, let's say I gave you 4/7 minus 3/7. Again, you make sure the denominator is the same, and then you just perform your operation. So 4 minus 3 is 1/7. So when adding or subtracting fractions, you make sure the denominators are the same. Let's look at problems if we don't have the same denominator. Let's say I gave you 2/5 plus 3/8. So a common mistake is that people would try to just add 2 plus 3 and then add 5 and 8, but you can't do that because it has to be the same denominator for adding fractions. It has to be in the same units. So to turn this into common denominators, I figure out a common multiple of 5 and 8. So you think to yourself, you list the multiples of 5 and you list the multiples of 8. So for 5, I've got 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40. For 8, there's 8, 16, 24, 32, and then 40. So right there I can see that there's a common multiple of 40. So I'm going to take 2/5. To turn 5 into 40, I have to multiply it by 8. So I have to also do that to the numerator. So that gives me 16/40. To take 3/8 and turn it into 40, I have to multiply by 5. So that gives me 15/40. So now I can add those two fractions together. 16/40 plus 15/40 gives me 31/40. So the rule is you just have to make sure you have the same common denominator in order to add. This also applies for subtraction. And then if you have problems that have mixed numbers or improper numbers, you can just convert those. So you can convert a mixed number to an improper fraction and then do the appropriate adding or subtracting when you're working with mixed and improper numbers. So that's adding and or subtracting with fractions. In the next video, we'll look at multiplying and dividing.